Morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore coming to you live from deep in the mountains of the Missouri Ozarks on Wednesday, the 13th day of December, year of our Lord 2017. Welcome to the John Moore Show. Purpose tip today is actually a two for today. You get 2 for 1. First, I want to make sure all of you check your winter car kits, that you have everything in your winter car kits that you need. If you have more than one vehicle, each vehicle should have its own winter car kit. Going to vary from person to person, region to region. Make sure that you've got what you need in there. The second prepper tip of the day, you can have substantial savings at your local supermarket. Possibly. I can't say definitely. Do what I do. I've got to know the manager of the store, and I've come to find out that if I buy certain items by the case, I can have a substantial savings of 25 to 35 or even more percent. So that's a pretty substantial savings, and all you need to do is make the inquiry. It may work for you, it may not, but that's what works for me at my local supermarket. We have a patient waiting in the green room, my friend Professor James McCanney. Professor McCanney is a credentialed astrophysicist. He has taught astrophysics at the university level at Cornell University. He's taught mathematics at Cornell University. He's an amateur archaeologist, a prolific author, having authored 10 books with more on the way, and weekly radio talk show host with not one but 2 radio talk shows weekly. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, John. How are you today?
Well, great. I'm looking forward to a mild early winter day here in south central Missouri. How about yourself?
Great. I'm up and moving. Let's put it that way. Already. So, today I want to have a little bit of a science lesson.
Let's do that.
A couple things. First of all, something that just drives me crazy when I see this. This popped up just in the last day. In science, there's general relativity, which I don't support at all, and neither did Einstein. John, I'm getting a lot of microphone noise. I don't know where that's coming from.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, the general relativity. Special relativity deals with the velocity of light and frames of reference and things like that. That's special relativity. But general relativity, in a sense, does also, but it throws in gravitational fields. And there's something called the principle of equivalence, which suggests that if you're in an elevator accelerating out in free space, but you have, say, a rocket engine, then all the experiments that you do should look exactly the same as if you're standing on a planet or some celestial object that has a gravitational field. It's called the principle of equivalence, and that's where the idea that light bends around the sun or a gravitational body, that's where that comes from. And it's really not true, because it doesn't work. And Einstein realized this, because to complete this whole theoretical process, you have to figure out why gravity should affect electromagnetic radiation, which is light. And so it's really never been verified experimentally. It just was assumed to be true. Eddington went out in the early 1900s, and I think it was 1919 or something like that. But anyway, he measured what appeared to be bending of light around the sun, but he fudged the data. And I've talked extensively about this, but recently scientists have put 2 bodies, gravitational masses, in a satellite, and as they go around Earth in the satellite, they've measured the difference in them falling. It's kind of like the equivalent of what Galileo did when he dropped 2 different size, one big metal ball and one small metal ball, off the Leaning Tower of Pisa. But it's done in outer space in a satellite to see the variability, if any, in 2 balls falling accelerating at the same rate. And the point is that that has nothing to do with light. And so these yo-yos are doing this and claiming the principle of equivalence is being proven. So anyway, things like this drive me crazy because it's just rotten science. It's not even good science. They're wasting time, wasting money, facilities, and then coming up with bogus results. So anyway, just to step off my soapbox here for a few minutes.
Well, talk about waste. I was reading a story this morning on Drudge Report that there's been analysis done of the bookkeeping of the Department of Defense and Housing and Urban Development, finding 21 trillion, that's trillion with a T, $21 trillion not properly accounted for, I believe, since 2005, which is roughly the equivalent of national debt, Jim.
Yeah, I'd believe that. I would absolutely believe that. And that started back in the 1950s when Congress allowed the military to have black budgets. And the reason they thought this was necessary was to prevent the Russians from knowing what we're doing. Well, I got news for you. The Russians know everything we're doing.
Of course they do.
And it has nothing to do with how much money we're spending. So that's been a little boondoggle that people have ridden the wave of that, pretending that it's for national security. Well, I can tell you something, too, from experience. There's no such thing as national security because as soon as the U.S. develops something secret, some better mousetrap for the military, it's a absolute foot race to Russia. The first guy there to sell it makes the money, and the second guy doesn't. So it's just like I say, an absolute foot race to sell it to other countries. And you see this popping up. You see it popping up, technologies from the United States that should be top secret. You see it popping up in the Russian stuff immediately and vice versa. And that's so the bankers can keep their balance of power, and so that one side does not get too big, because if it does, then the bankers lose their control. The way they control is by the balance of power, by making sure that any country can be defeated by the other country, and that's what they did starting in the Russian Revolution with the Reds and the Whites. The Reds were the Bolsheviks, who won because the Rothschilds put their support behind them, and the Mensheviks, who lost because the Rothschilds pulled their support from them. And so this has been going on ever since. So the Cold War was never anything but the bankers jerking everybody's chain, basically. So, and this goes back to science and military and funding in both countries.
Right. Well, your synopsis is right on, Jim, and consistent with history as I know it, and unfortunately consistent with our not too distant future.
Yeah. Well, Trump yesterday, 2 days ago, on the 11th, signed a bill. He had NASA and a lot of the, what do they call the, I love some of these names, the National Space Council, made up of a lot of good old boy corporations, or the Commercial Space Flight Federation. How do you like that one? It almost sounds like Star Wars.
It does.
And then the Space Policy Directive. And so anyway, what they're doing is Trump is redirecting NASA to go to the moon and then set up a base and then use it as a base to go to Mars. But thrown in there is that NASA is supposed to help our military become space adept, which, if you know anything about the real space program, NASA is the front agency to make it look like they're doing something, but really aren't. And I'm going to be talking about all these topics on my show tomorrow night. But it's NASA has been trying to do the old soft shoe dance off the stage and not have to go to the moon, and they're talking about 2040 sending a man to Mars, like an Apollo type of one man goes type of thing. And in the meantime, that's 22 years away. Everybody gets a salary, everybody gets paid, retired, and life is good.
That's right.
So anyway, Trump is saying, well, no, boys, you got to go to the moon first. And so NASA's there. Of course, they're happy because they're getting their money. But if you remember a short while ago, one of the first things that Obama did when he came into office, which kind of surprised me because he's a banker boy, was to cancel George Bush Jr.'s let's go to the moon thing, where they were going to rebuild the Apollo program and go to the moon again. And Obama had an analysis by independent scientists, and they came in, and it was just universal agreement that NASA had no ability to go to the moon. And this program was just funding a vacuous program. They had, after years of work, they had nothing but animation and some drawings that looked like 1950s drawings with a little modern touch to them. But, and they had not done anything real. So all this is real interesting.
It is. It is fascinating. Well, yeah. Where do you want to go from there, Jim?
Well, it's just, I'm not sure what Trump is thinking, but there's a saying that NASA is Congress-proof, and it's probably president-proof. That what they did is they put in every constituency, in every what would you call it, house, the regions or the districts. That's what they're called, districts for the House, is what we call the Senate. Every district has NASA contracts. So the end result is that nobody in their right mind would cancel any of this, especially in Congress, because if you did vote against some NASA program, then your district would get cut and jobs would be lost, and you would lose, you wouldn't be there the next term. So it's political suicide to vote against something NASA. And a lot of these companies are little companies, and they make a bolt or a cup or something that goes in the space program, and that they can hold up and say, look, we employ people in every district, in our district. Yeah, so it's a way of hanging a noose over anybody's head that might vote against NASA. It's called NASA. NASA is Congress-proof. So anyway, I think Trump is probably feeling a bit of that, but what I thought was interesting is he wants them to go back to the moon first, which NASA was trying to, like I say, do the little soft shoe around that one, like, back in the day of vaudeville, when the jokes were not funny and the people were starting to throw tomatoes, the guy would just, do the little dance and dance off stage. And That's what NASA was trying to do. But Trump, I think that's a way of telling them, no, boys, you got to go to the moon again. And, of course, they're real happy because they're getting some money, but then they got to, the rubber's going to meet the road here. Can they go back to the moon? And deep inside, they know they can't. But they're there to take their money because that's the only game in town right now.
Well, of course they're going to take the money.
That's what it's all about, yeah. But like I say, I love the name of these things. It's National Space Council. That's like the Canadian Wind Energy Association or the U.S. Wind Energy Association. It's made up of the companies that are benefiting from government kickbacks. because they wouldn't be in business if there weren't such things.
Right. Well, it's a tangled web we weave, and some of these underlying things never change, do they, Jim?
No, but the end result is that we don't have a space program. We still don't. And with this new directive, with all the fanfare and America First, I got news for you. America never was first in the space program. Well, we were waiting for the Apollo space program and the Gemini space program before that. For onesie, twosie launches, the Russians were launching 2 and 3 times a day manned missions to space. And I know from dealing directly with Russian scientists that they tried to send men to the moon long before we ever did. They had fully capability of doing that, and it wasn't to land on the moon, it was just to go around the moon and come back. And these guys came back very dead and with severe radiation damage. And so the Russians realized that the radiation in space is the problem, and they never went back. So, and that was very early on. That was before the U.S. ever thought about sending a man to the moon. That's just, another, and they would laugh when we would talk. They'd laugh. They said, NASA never went to the moon. They would just, with the Cold War going on, who would believe a lying Russian scientist?
Exactly. Jim, we got a caller on hold. We got Dan in Missouri. Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, John and Mr. McKinney. I'm in the same boat exactly with both of you guys. I don't think we went. I've seen enough video and enough intelligent people listen to them talking about all the problems why we really didn't get there.
Hold that thought, Dan. We'll get back to your comments after the break. Stay tuned, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient, and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at thelibertyman.com. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 13th of December. Dan, let's continue with your comments.
Yeah, I was snooping around on the Internet the other day, and I stumbled on a video or a YouTube of an astronaut standing outside of the landing module, I guess, and he had around a 2 kilogram, I think they said, aluminum hammer and a falcon feather. And I had never seen that. And that was one of my big questions as to why they didn't do that Galileo experiment in front of cameras for the general public, so that would somewhat give you some validation that they were there. And sure enough, I stumbled on that thing. My jaw dropped. And I'm not saying they went again. I didn't change my mind. But they did have to do some finagling, I guess, if they recreated that here on Earth. They had a long, skinny feather that would, I guess, be a falcon feather, they said it was. Held that hammer out in front of them and dropped it, and that feather didn't flutter at all. It hit the ground the same time as the hammer. And I didn't know if you guys had ever seen that. If you look up hammer and falcon feather on the moon, I'm sure that YouTube will pop up. And again, I'm not... Go ahead.
Let me interrupt you for a second there.
Sure.
I'm familiar with the location. It's in Colorado Springs, and they have a tall building that has an evacuated chamber. And they do that in the chamber. They can drop a feather and a steel ball in the chamber, and you can actually watch the feather fall. Now, there's some videos of that. So I wonder if they somehow used that. And some of these also, you wonder when they were made. There's things that have come out about the alleged lunar program that are recent. Like now they're saying that NASA had another mission which went around the moon and came back before they landed on the moon. And that was never there before. And so they've added things since, so supposed fun facts. So anyway, I've not seen that, but there would be a way to fake that. That's what I'm telling you.
I can't imagine they couldn't fake it with the ability today with Photoshop and all the other stuff that they can do that I can't even conceive of. Okay, I just thought I'd throw that in there.
Dan, that in a court of law today, photographs and videos are not allowed as evidence, and that's why.
Yeah, they've doctored them so easy and so well. Okay, my next thing, real quick.
But anyway, that's. I just want to follow up that.
Okay,
that's not evidence, and we can go back and forth about that all day, or NASA could do this or talk. But the real evidence is very simple, and that is that no independent third party has ever verified that they went to the moon. The only people that have ever told us they went to the moon is NASA themselves.
Good
and they
point.
were supposed to verify this with the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, which was manned by the University of Arizona, not exactly the most uprighteous and honest astronomy department on the planet. They have some other finagling to their credit. But we waited for years for this. There was just the fanfare. We were going to have high-resolution photos of the Apollo landing sites. And when the date came, when the pictures were taken, and it finally got in orbit, then all of a sudden the data didn't come out for months, like 6 months afterwards. And then finally they put out these couple photos, not of all of the sites, but just a couple, and it looked like pencil scratching where the lunar rover supposedly drove around. And there was about 4 pixels. I mean, your phone camera could have done better where the supposed lunar landers were. Right. And so, anyway, no, that was the big proof that NASA went to the moon. So the latest thing was Andy Weil has a new book out, which they're touting takes place at one of the lunar landing sites. That's the extent they're going to try and promote this. Tomorrow night I'll be talking about Buzz Aldrin. It's really disgusting. He's got a new clothing line, New York designer clothing line coming out promoting NASA going to Mars in the year 2040. I'll be talking about that tomorrow night. And that's worth noting with a American flag that's really not an American flag. And I'm wondering, like, what on earth is this all about? But that's something I'll be going into detail. If people want me to talk a little bit about that now, I could too.
That would be good. I imagine the clothing line will be made in China or Bangladesh or somewhere. I'm just guessing, but you got that profit margin you got to get,
Yeah.
Okay. One other thing I'd like you to.
Well, the other thing will be after the break. After the break, we'll get the other thing.
Sure.
Right.
Thank you.
Hold on, we'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
All right, we are back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 13th of December. My website is thelibertyman.com. Good news, I determined yesterday what happened to my mattress pads. They were shipped to Texas instead of to Missouri. They'll be here in a day or two. So I know a bunch of you are waiting for mattress pads and energy cleaners. Spoke to Tom Berryhill this morning. He's on the job. Energy cleaners are being produced as we speak. So if you've been wanting an energy cleaner and a mattress pad, we can get them out to you. That's good news. If you have arthritis pain, joint pain, back pain, what are you waiting for? Energy cleaner will probably help you. Keep in mind, I offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. You're risking nothing when you get your energy cleaner. I use mine every night. I do. And wake up refreshed and energetic, ready to go get them. I take PayPal, the most secure way to make any payment online, to make payment for your energy cleaner. And PayPal, by the way, now takes payments if you live in the USA. MasterCard, Visa, checks can be sent to my address at thelibertyman.com. I have a toll-free auto line 24 hours a day, 800-592-9543. That's it again, 800-592-9543. Visiting with Professor James McCanney. Jim, before we get back to Dan's comments, tell people about your 2 weekly radio shows, how they can listen in the archives, if you would please, sir.
Yes, thanks, John. It's every Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Central Time, WWCR, Nashville, Tennessee, and the frequencies, etc., change during the year because I'm right at that cusp between day and nighttime. So depending on whether that's daytime or nighttime, the frequency changes. I'm one of those rare people that just sits on that day-night change, and so the frequency of my show changes during the year. So go to my webpage to get the current frequency, and so that re-airs then Friday evening 10 p.m. and Saturday morning 3 a.m. from WTWW Nashville. And then it re-airs quite a few times on Saturday through satellite. So go to my webpage, and the archives are on my webpage. And I want to reaffirm something, John. People should be listening at least occasionally to my show on shortwave. And the reason being they should have a shortwave radio that goes all the way down to the 5070 frequency. Because during November I was away, let me just put it that way, for quite a few weeks, and so I was not able to get my archive up there, and people thought I died and went to heaven. And I was there for my live show every week, and I thought, well, gee, people will just listen. And these people were like, well, you died, what happened? I said, no, I was there for the live show every week. I just didn't get the webpage updated because I do all this myself. And so, and that's a lesson too in general, because there might be some day when the internet is just not there. So people have to get shortwave radios, get one that's portable, and there's a huge variety out there. I'm not going to recommend any, but you have to get them down to the lower frequencies. The cheaper shortwave radios don't go down to the lower frequencies. And one with a digital dial, all of that. But people need a shortwave radio, and they have to use it and listen. Okay, so, and then my paid cast every week, another hour of scientific topics Oddly enough, last month, November, I concentrated on the space flight and human space flight, past, present, and beyond. And then December, I'm talking about alternative energy, or the myth of alternative energy, on my Paidcast. So $3.95 a month, that's all on my webpage.
All right. Let's get back to your comments, Dan.
Did we lose Dan?
Did we lose Dan? Are you still there, Dan? Okay.
Just one last comment on that, John. I have a statement on my webpage, which is my official public statement, and that is that the alleged lunar landing of Apollo by NASA, excuse me, back in 1969 and thereafter up to the early 1970s, is a unverified scientific claim. And in science, we need third-party independent verification of scientific claims, and there is none. So therefore, it remains as an unverified scientific claim. That's my public statement.
Okay. Well, there were 17 alleged Apollo missions, and you can watch these things on YouTube. And the simple thing I like to point out to people is the flags. Now, you can't have wind unless you've got an atmosphere, and these flags are clearly blowing in the wind. NASA claims it's residual energy left over from sticking the flagpole in the surface of the moon, which might make sense until you see the flag flying in the breeze, come to a complete stop with nobody touching the flagpole, and then starting up flying again in the same breeze. So it's simple. Anybody can do it. Anybody can watch the official video from NASA and demonstrate to yourself that what happened did not take place on the moon. It took place on a soundstage someplace.
Right, and finally, NASA lost all of the video, including the original and all the copies, and without any excuse, like, oh, it was in an old warehouse, and somebody didn't know what it was, so they just threw it out. Yeah, right, boys and girls. But then they admitted that they were faked, and they said, but we still went to the moon. Well, would you believe a, self-certified liar? They have no credibility. But the end result is that there's no independent verification that they did this. And that's the litmus test for science. So it's one of the biggest scientific claims of all history. They're getting money to go do this again, and there's no independent verification they ever did it in the first place. That's the simple scientific statement.
Well, another easy way to prove it would be simply turn the Hubble Space Telescope towards the landing sites and turn the darn thing on.
Right. Well, that was suggested back, when the Hubble first went up there, and NASA said, well, it's a tracking problem. The Hubble wasn't designed for tracking. And then when people realized that was not an issue because this is a snapshot, because there's a lot of light coming off the moon, they said, well, it's a light problem. There's too much light coming from the moon. So we don't want to hurt the delicate cameras on the Hubble. And then one day, some new astronomical jockey that had control of the Hubble took a picture of the entire full moon with the Hubble Space Telescope perfectly in focus and blew their excuse out of the water. So anyway, yeah. They couldn't take a picture of a little piece of it, but they could take a picture of the whole darn thing with all the light coming off the moon with no problem at all.
Exactly. Well, it's a very sad situation that this farce has gone on now for not quite half a century.
And is now being promoted to continue.
Exactly.
That's what, But there again, it's something that Trump did is when he funded NASA this year, this is unrelated to this directive, which wasn't funding, it was a directive. But he gave NASA 7 years to become financially independent, giving them, it was the only agency in the government this year that got 100% funding. I mean, the EPA and all the other agencies got seriously cut, but NASA got 100% funding. And, but in there, he said that in 7 years, which would be the third year of his second term, if he's elected again, NASA would have to become financially self-supporting, which ain't going to happen because NASA is just terribly top-heavy.
Right.
Lots of chiefs, not many Indians, as they say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, have we beat up on NASA sufficiently for this morning?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened in the last couple of days here that warrant. And like I say, I'll be talking more about the Buzz Aldrin thing tomorrow because that's pretty bizarre in itself. Anyway.
Well, Buzz Aldrin wants to have a clothing line. God bless him. I mean, I don't see any harm in it. But yeah. Well, the fraud and the deceit continues, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, but in the background, there is some stuff going on. There's actually things going on, but people like Elon Musk don't understand. There's a lot of things, he wants to go to Mars. He was going to go to Mars next year, and then he backed off on that. So I'm not sure why. If somebody tapped him on the shoulder and said, Elon, we got a little problem called radiation. Nobody's ever solved it.
Right.
And, and he was already taking orders from movie stars who wanted to go to Mars, taking down payments, so.
Well,
anyway.
Jim, if I'm sitting out here in the Ozarks, 30 miles from the nearest red, green, and yellow traffic signal, and I know about the Van Allen radiation belt, how come these people don't?
Well, they do. There was a program called Living with a Star, and they had every chemist, physicist, geologist, whatever, working on this, trying to contribute how to deal with space radiation. And I know from years and years of working on physics and math problems, before you solve a problem, you have to define it. And NASA couldn't even define what is space radiation, where does it come from, what causes it, and how do we, they couldn't even define it, let alone mitigate it. So
Right. We got a caller on hold here, Jim. We got Roxanne in Texas. Good morning, Roxanne.
Hi, John. Hi, Dr. McHaney. I'm just wanting to double down on what you're all saying. I dated an astronaut. He spent 3 missions up on the space station. He's a physicist and an engineer. And I said, Mike, what about going to the moon? And he squarely looked me in the eye and said, we can't get past the Van Allen belt. That's it. So keep up the good work. We appreciate all you do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the NASA has never left low Earth orbit since then. And if it was like walking out your back door and just walking around and, getting on your bike and going down the street, they would have done it, but they have never, ever gone out of low Earth orbit since. So, in the Living with a Star program, all of that, they clearly don't have a clue, but they're marching along with this, we're going to go back to Mars thing. And the reason they wanted to go to Mars is because they don't ever have to do anything. They can put it out there, and by the time anything comes to fruition, they can pretend like they're working like little busy bees down here on Earth and never have to go into space. And by that time, they'll all be retired on the golf course. And so that's the goal. That's the goal of this whole deal. But Trump is making them go back to the moon, and I wonder if behind this, there's going to be some real scientists watching what they're doing.
All right.
That's the Trump way of dealing with stuff. So he has a way of dealing with things. So he might be politically hogtied, as they say, but also in the background dealing with NASA on in the back room, so to speak, like you're fired type of thing.
Okay, thank you for the call, Roxanne. Dan is back. Dan, let's get back with your question here.
Yeah, I won't take much more time. I also stumbled on a bunch of YouTubes on the debacle over there at Fukushima, and it doesn't discredit anything you have brought up at all. It just reinforces it. It's just absolutely horrible what's going on in the Pacific Ocean. If you wouldn't mind, if you've got anything to add to that. I mean, it looks to me like that there's nothing more important on this planet right now than trying to mitigate Fukushima, if it's even possible. I mean, that's just a death knell for the planet, it seems like. So I'll listen to you off the phone, and I appreciate everything you guys do.
I just saw a note where India is trying to get off their nuclear dependency. And so we'll see where that goes. But, Fukushima is absolute international disaster, and it's not getting any better. I don't even know what to say, because it could have been dealt with at the time. But, now it's just it's almost beyond repair. Maybe something could still be done. I don't know. But it was certainly a much bigger problem now. The cookie jar is broken and all the cookies are all over the place. It's horrible. Yeah, it's a real ecological disaster, much worse than Chernobyl. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I've talked about Fukushima, and it's like going and banging your head on the brick wall over there. Because the people who really need to be doing something are like draining the lake at Yellowstone. These are major international things that have to be done. And, the people in charge just aren't not even talking about it. It's not even on the map.
All right. Well, the Pacific Ocean takes up almost half the planet, and of course, all these oceans are connected, aren't they, Jim?
Oh yeah, It's already leaking, around the other areas, like the Great Barrier Reef of Australia is dying off, and it just so happens that it started around 2013, shortly after Fukushima, and all the scientists run around, it's global warming. It's like, oh my goodness. Yeah, it's the idiocy that comes out of science, but, and also the same thing along the West Coast, up from Oregon up to Alaska. They're having serious problems with the fishing industry and all of that. And they have scientists that'll come out and say it's the red algae or the green algae or, whatever ridiculous thing they can say just to get it out of the public eye.
Here's our break. Everybody stay tuned. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 13th, talking to Professor McKinney. Jim, we got about 3 minutes here.
John, I want to wrap it up by talking about the wing generator program. People are contacting me about this. It's very exciting because a lot of very interesting things have happened. Let's just say engineering developments, and they're coming to fruition with people actually talking about installing them. So just email me. All the information is on my webpage at the top, jmccsci.com, and send me an email if you have a farm or a ranch where you would like to have independence of electricity. So, and then we'll get a hold of you and get more information. But all that information, all of the how to email is at the top of my webpage. At any rate, that's for me very exciting.
It is exciting for everybody. And a quick reminder, Jim's webpage is linked to my links page at thelibertyman.com.
Yes.
Exciting times. Fast-changing times, aren't they, Jim?
Yeah. And so there's a lot of other things that'll come out. I'll have a special announcement early in January. Let's just put it this way: within the first couple weeks of January, and sometime in that time frame that nobody has ever heard about before. So there's some very interesting related topics or things, actual things that I'm working on. So. To me, this is very exciting. So, just people heads up.
Well, it'll be January here in less than 3 weeks. So,
I know.
To hearing that soon. Yes. Okay. Well, great. I encourage everybody to listen to Professor McKinney's radio shows and to get and read all 10 of his books, quite frankly, and check out the water filters. Jim's water filters listed for sale on my website on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. Great water filters and wonderful storage tanks for water as well, right, Jim?
Oh, exactly. And everybody needs a storage tank. This idea that you're going to fill your bathtub if there's an emergency, believe me, it does not work. You don't want some kind of open container. You need a closed container that's planned. You're putting filtered water into it. For storage and for emergency. So, storage tanks, they go from 125 gallons up to 20,000 gallons. So depending on what you need, there's storage tanks there.
Absolutely. Well, check it out, ladies and gentlemen, and if you find something that suits your needs, then go ahead and get it in your inventory, and it'll be there when you need it. Right, Jim?
Exactly. And I encourage people to look at the commercial grade filters, the high flow rate filters, up to 12 gallons per minute. That's a lot of water through a water filter, and it gives you completely pure water. So nothing like that any place on the planet.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Jim, I don't want to be cut off by the music. I want to thank you for being with us and look forward to having you back next Wednesday.
Thanks, John. See you, everybody.
Okay. All right. Top of the hour break. Stay tuned. We'll be back with Open Lines. Gentlemen, J.R. Moore here, our second hour on Wednesday, the 13th of December. Prepper tip of the day. It's a twofer. First, I want all of you to make sure your winter car kit, or kits plural if you got more than one motor vehicle, your winter car kits are all squared away, that you've got everything in your winter car kits that you need. That's number one. Number two, you might want to do what I've done. Introduce yourself to the manager at your local supermarket and find out if you can get a discount on buying case lots of food. I know there's a particular brand of cashew butter that I like, that I get a nice substantial discount on the cashew butter when I buy it in case lot. It varies, 25%, 30, 35%. I've seen as high as 40% discount. That's all of which are very substantial. It may work for you, it may not. It works for me at the local supermarket I go to, and so you need to check that out and see if it'll work for you. We'll have open lines this hour. The call number is 800-313-9443. Well, in less than 3 weeks, it will be 2018. Seems like this year is flying by. On the right side of my homepage, just to the right side of me and my tiger stripes on the side of a deuce and a half there, a Memorial Day event we had a year and a half ago, you'll see field training exercise, USS Liberty, December 31st, 2018. Well, I've been a radio talk show host for 22 years, part-time initially, now full-time. And back in the late 90s, we had the issue with Y2K, which was a hard date for a man-made event that did, in fact, have a man-made solution. There were issues with Y2K that were kept pretty quiet. I know just locally around Metro St. Louis, St. Louis County Police installed a brand new 911 system that absolutely collapsed at midnight, January 1st, 2000. And it didn't work for months. It didn't work properly for months. But that was fixed. People bug me for a date. Now I'm giving you a date, December 31st, 2018, just over a year away. That's a date to get prepared for any of the following 5 or all 5 of the following scenarios. You get to pick and choose any 1 or 2 or all 5 if you like. Here's the scenarios to prepare for 12 months away. Number 1, economic collapse leading to civil disorder. That's inevitable, by the way. There's no precedence. We have pretty good records of countries and empires going back a couple of thousand years plus. And there's no precedence for a country doing what we're doing and surviving economically. That's number 1. Number 2, World War III, pretty self-explanatory. Number 3, rapid onset violent earth changes. Well, we're having the earth changes right now. They're not all that rapid, but they are becoming more and more violent and more frequent, aren't they? Number 4, widespread terrorist attacks seem to be happening more frequently with ISIS and their friends. And last but not least, number 5, natural or man-made EMP, which I talk about a lot. It may be the ideal weapon. It doesn't cause any damage to most major infrastructure. For example, you take an oil refinery. The oil refinery would be knocked out of commission instantly with EMP on one hand. On the other, the main infrastructure is still in place and ready to go once the engineers replace all the electronics that make it function. How about that? A hydroelectric plant in place to make electricity. EMP would knock it out instantly on one hand. On the other, once the engineers replace all the electronics, the hydroelectric plant would be once again making electricity. That's assuming that it doesn't have proper protections against EMP, which they should have. I don't know one way or the other if they do. So I think it's important to have a specific goal. And I don't know if it's just a Western thing or an American thing, but people seem to, Americans anyway, seem to want to focus on getting prepared for a certain event on a certain date. Well, you got the date, and you can move forward from there. We got a caller on hold here. We got Mark in Oregon. Good morning, Mark.
Hello, Mr. Moore. I had a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. You're fine. Go ahead.
I had a friend years ago. He went to a survival expo up in Spokane, Washington, and he said there was a man there that was making ponchos out of the Alice pack covers because he believed they deflected infrared. Have you ever heard anything like that?
No, sir. I've seen Alice covers, backpack covers, and I'm not aware of anything in that would deflect or protect you from thermal imaging.
Okay.
In fact, we're going to have a guest tomorrow, briefly, talking about thermtech suits, which are made up there in Montana, and they really do protect you from thermal imaging. Well, the military does have thermal imaging, counter thermal imaging equipment, ponchos, but you can't get your hands on that. It's just it's very. I mean, you just simply can't. So.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Moore. I appreciate
Mark.
Everything you do.
Okay. Thank you
Bye.
for the call. The call number is 888-313-9443. Yeah, ThermTech. I just processed an order yesterday for a ThermTech suit for a gentleman up in Montana, and I talked to the manufacturer yesterday a couple of times, and we're going to have him on briefly. He's not a morning person, so he's going to do just about 5 minutes or so on the second hour and talk briefly about ThermTech suits. They're for sale there at my website at thelibertyman.com. Getting back to field training exercise, USS Liberty, and in fact, back up a bit. If you don't know what the USS Liberty was a U.S. Navy ship, electronic a ship to do electronic intercepts is what I'm trying to say. It was off the coast of Israel during the lead up to the Six-Day War in 1967, and the Israeli Air Force attacked it. They were trying to sink it. They were trying their best to sink it. Quite a few U.S. sailors lost their lives. One Israeli Air Force pilot, in my opinion, was a hero. He saw that American flag and he refused to attack the ship. He was most likely court-martialed, maybe jailed. I don't know what his fate was, but he did the right thing by not attacking an American warship like his fellow Israeli Air Force guys did. There's never been any real public accounting for this. President Johnson put the U.S. Navy on stand down to come to the aid of their own warship. You can believe that. President Johnson was not a nice guy. He was, in my opinion, he was a war criminal, first of all, and a lot of other things. But he did not allow the U.S. Navy to respond to the attack, which went on more than an hour, with the Israeli Air Force attempting to sink the USS Liberty. So I gave this field training exercise that name just as a way to help memorialize what happened that day when our American warship, was attacked by the Israeli Air Force. An outrageous act of war by our alleged ally. Okay, my advice when it comes to this. Number one, get your spiritual house in order. I make it number one for a reason. The reason being, it is the single most important thing you do. Over and above freeze-dried food, water filters, medical equipment, firearms, ammunition, radios. It is the number one for a reason. It is the most important thing you can do. Now, I do private consultations. If you want a private consultation, you can look up the details there at my website under professional consultations and keynote presentations. And I've had some very wealthy clients, quite wealthy, who could buy freeze-dried food by the tractor-trailer load, get a nice piece of property, water filters, all those things. It was never enough. It was never enough for the following reason. Their spiritual house was not in order. They did not have peace in their heart, and it would never be enough. And it's a very sad situation. So that's number one for a reason. We had a caller on hold here. We got Ed in Utah. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Mr. Moore. You said open lines this hour?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I'd like to talk about the other Mr. Moore, the Roy Moore campaign in Alabama last night.
Right.
I have to be honest. I'm quite stunned. I've checked all the usual websites. I know there'll be stuff as the day goes on posted on RBN. Did you follow that election results last night, Mr. Moore?
Not as they were coming in. I saw them this morning, obviously. There was some, and I have more experience with these matters than most. I was a candidate for U.S. Congress back in the 96 cycle, and I've got to meet people at some fairly high levels. When the Republican National Committee pulled support publicly from him, and then later, after the president endorsed him, it was too late. Too little, too late. The endorsement of the president should have been earlier. If the Republican National Committee had not pulled their support, I think it would have had a different outcome. But doing those gyrations that late in the campaign, I believe was what caused it to go the way it went. There's not been a Democratic senator elected in that state for a quarter century, 25 years, for very good reason.
Right.
The people in Alabama don't trust Democrats. The Democratic Party is anti-gun, pro-homosexual, pro-illegal aliens, and people in Alabama don't want that. But we can thank the Republican National Committee for that outcome last night. Go ahead, Ed.
Well, I will accept everything you're saying if the results are accurate. Now, here is my problem with this. Your analysis is spot on. The problem I'm having, though, is that all the polls this weekend, with one exception, Fox News, had Doug Jones winning by 10 points, way out in left field. But notice it was Fox News, the conservative stronghold, supposedly.
Right.
Okay, so, and like you said, Trump came in way too late with his robocall and all that at the very end. You had Richard Shelby doing all the TV talk shows this weekend, the disgusting other Alabama senator, disgusting, that came out and said, I'm not voting for Roy Moore, and voted on this write-in. Well, they used that in the narrative this morning and last night to say 22,000 write-ins, and it was enough because the vote totals, what they're telling us are the totals, Mr. Moore, are that Doug Jones won by 20,000. But what I focused on was it was Fox to get all the people on the conservative side of things saying, well, if Fox is saying it, it must be true. So they come out with this phony poll on the weekend, and then they were the ones that called it last night. Now, you say you only got the final results today. Let me tell you what shocked me. Even ABC analysts were saying, how does Doug Jones do this? He's got one possibility. Then as the results were coming in, Mr. Moore, they said 44% of the precincts reporting that Roy Moore was winning by 6 percentage points. That was right in line with almost all the polls through the weekend, and Roy Moore's own campaign, single-digit lead, what have you. And so at 44% of the precincts, then suddenly, at around 8:30 last night, it started changing. Before you know it, there was a 2.5 point only lead for Mr. Moore over Doug Jones. And then in the final, around 9 p.m. last night, Central, they're up there saying, it's now neck and neck. It's a horse race. I submit to you, they started flipping votes. It doesn't add, just to what you said, Alabamans don't go for a guy like Doug Jones, pro-same-sex bathrooms, pro-abortion, and what have you. Even somebody that they might have a few reservations about concerning the allegations on Roy Moore, they're not going to go with a guy named Doug Jones. Here's what I'm finding amazing. I don't hear even the Bannon network even questioning it. There was more questions about Obama's primary with as far as vote fraud goes. What are your thoughts on the? And then Trump concedes the election before Roy Moore. Roy Moore has to have some idea of the numbers. He's yet to concede. What are your thoughts on this, Mr. Moore?
Well, first of all, I'm a big advocate of paper ballots counted at the precinct. That's the only way that I'm aware of that you can really come close to guaranteeing a free and fair election. I've personally, in Missouri, in my state of Missouri, I've personally observed vote fraud involving computers counting votes. I've seen it firsthand. And of course it goes on. It's foolish to believe otherwise. I don't know what went on in terms of Alabama, what their protocols are, if they use computers, if they use paper ballots, if there's paper ballot backups. If you got the paper ballot backup, why do you need a computer in the first place? So I don't know the details of how they do their voting down there. I know that for decades the Democrats have been wanting to make sure that people who care less about voting are registered to vote. You get registered to vote when you get your driver's license, for example. It's called motor voter here in Missouri. Voting should be something that people make a conscious decision to do, not just something, not a clerk at the driver's driver's bureau, the license bureau,
You got it.
asking you, that's very passive. And people say yes routinely. It should be something that people exercise because they make a conscious effort and a conscious decision to do so. So I don't know the details, Ed. I would like to see some details and some evidence of what goes on in Alabama.
Yeah, one last thing on this. I go way back with you on that, Mr. Moore. I've read Boat Scam, The Stealing of America by the Collier brothers. And interestingly, they did a fake moonwalk video themselves, like 20-some years ago. Is it only a paper moon? Featured on the Eric Bell.
You want to hold on through the break here, Ed?
I do.
Okay, hold on through the break. We'll be right back, everybody. Gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient, and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at thelibertyman.com. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 13th of December. Ed, let's continue with your comments, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I really hope that you do a follow-up on this with your pretty much expert background, having run for Congress, and just your familiarity with it. For my part, I'm going to say this. Like I said, I read Boat Scam, The Stealing of America, by Jim Collier, but also I was looking at how they set up false narratives, just like the Washington Post moved in with Rory Allred to take him down that first week. Well, he wouldn't go. And so they brought out the second lion woman, Bev Nelson, and her story completely was destroyed, fell apart with her lying, and she admitted she fabricated on the yearbook notations there, supposedly by Roy Moore. She admitted she added much of that in herself. So on with you last night. So about 8 o'clock, Mr. Moore, all of a sudden, they said that 44% of the precincts, and if I'm not mistaken, ABC, that's who I was following on this, as far as big media goes, they were saying that the counties around Birmingham and Montgomery were already in. Well, excuse me, that is the black vote stronghold in Alabama. So that's why they were saying it's going to be uphill battle. Their own comments, Mr. Moore. It's going to be an uphill battle for Doug Jones with Birmingham and Montgomery pretty much in. This is about 8 o'clock, 44% of the precincts in. So the northern areas, which were traditionally, they said, late coming in Alabama, that's what I understand, those were heavily leaning toward, of course, Roy Moore. Well, how does it now go from a 6-point lead, 5.8-point lead, to within a half an hour, and now 77% of the precincts showing, suddenly they're at less than 3%. And then half an hour later, bucking up on 9 o'clock, all of a sudden, it's neck and neck. You follow my suspicion here?
Right. I've seen this firsthand, Ed. It's been about 20 plus years ago that we had a referendum in Missouri on concealed carry. There was 113 counties in Missouri. So I'm at the campaign headquarters for the concealed carry effort there in St. Louis County, and by 7 p.m. we were seeing most of the 113 counties were heavily in favor of. In fact, all of them were very much in favor of concealed carry. At 7 p.m., the St. Louis County computers broke and stopped counting votes. And the votes keep coming on. By 9 o'clock, and I may be off because I haven't looked at this for a while in terms of numbers, but most of the 113 of the 112 other counties had already voted in favor of concealed carry. At 9 o'clock, the St. Louis County computers fixed themselves, and they defeated the rest of the state by that one county, St. Louis County, and we lost that referendum. So it was vote fraud on the face of it, and I've seen it firsthand. There's other examples that I won't go into. That's just one of many.
Yeah, right. And then last night with Donald Trump, what are your thoughts on this? He comes in and congratulates Doug Jones while it was well noted that Roy Moore had yet to concede, and he still hasn't conceded. Well, what do you think
if the polls were already closed, I don't see any harm in that. These guys are going to have to get along at some point, somehow, some way. But if the polls were closed, that couldn't affect the vote.
No, it's not a thing of. I wasn't thinking that Donald Trump was trying to do that. I'm just saying that before the concession was in, and they're talking, and that's another thing. The numbers are suspicious this way. By the 14,000 point lead they had, that he said he had at around 9:30 last night, Mr. Moore. At that point, they said that brings the margin of victory at 0.7%, which would mean that at the half percentage point, it triggers an automatic recount. And I'm thinking, boy, they seem to have this right where they want it. So here's a guy losing by 6 percentage points, which backed all the polls. Most of the Democrat strongholds in the black areas of Alabama, those tallies were in, and then all of a sudden, like a football game somehow, like you get a comeback in the fourth quarter.
Right.
This ain't a football game. These are votes, like you said, already cast. How does it happen that he now gets up to 3% and somehow gets neck and neck and somehow wins? I think Mr. Moore knows that something happened there. Mr. Roy Moore knows that something happened there.
Well, there'll be people looking. You're right. There'll be people looking into this, and they'll be reporting to us. Anything else, Ed? We've got about an hour break coming up.
Well, listen, you've given me a lot of time here. I do hope that you will look into the Alabama election last night, because
I will be paying attention. I will be paying attention. Thank you for the call, Ed. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. About an hour break here momentarily. Yeah, the likelihood of vote fraud is certainly a strong possibility. Right now, we can only speculate. We need hard evidence of what actually happened down there. Here's our break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. We're continuing our Energy Cleaner promotion, which began August of 2016. In this promotion, you get to buy an Energy Cleaner, $70 off retail, and a mattress pad, 10% off retail. $200 of the purchase price of the Energy Cleaner goes to Republic Broadcasting. This is a great way to help get energy cleaners out to people who need them and have some financial issues to deal with. And, of course, a great way to support Republic Broadcasting. Here's what you do. Send in a postcard. My address is John Moore, P.O. Box 201, Davidsville, Missouri. We pick a postcard every 2 weeks. If your postcard is drawn, you get the chance to buy the Energy Cleaner, $70 off retail, and 10% off the mattress pads. Put your name, and your address, your telephone number, and your email address on the postcard, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you. Back, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 13th of December. My website is thelibertyman.com. That's thelibertyman.com. There's lots there. I had some communication with a listener the last couple of days commenting about how much is at my website. Everything there was carefully thought out and reviewed before it was placed there. Everything. And yes, you can spend a lot of time there. No sense getting in a hurry. We got some interesting videos. The top one there is Master Sergeant Roy Benavides, who I got to have lunch with a few years back. He's now deceased. A Green Beret hero, quite frankly. A video from John Wayne, 1970, with an amazing list of stars there. Only John Wayne could have put that together. A video about cancer. Then there was a video about a woman being interviewed who was thought she was helping legitimate refugees coming to this country and found out that was not the case. Then a video about what really the true nature of U.S. Senator John McCain and what his fellow prisoners of war think about him. Then something pretty funny. Done by BBC, The Real Housewives of ISIS. It's a hoot. It's only 2 or 3 minutes. Then there's a short video of myself there. And then last but not least, a little video about the jet stream crossing the equator. Oh, there's a couple more down there. FEMA, high-level briefing on mega earthquake swarms. And Pastor Manning, a black pastor. I love that guy. He does such a good job. Of course, also at my website, you'll find energy cleaners. If you have arthritis pain, joint pain, back pain, hey, get yourself an energy cleaner. Not getting a great night's sleep, you're taking meds to go to sleep at night, get yourself an energy cleaner. Pain medication is harmful, dangerous, long-term, expensive. You need to get rid of the pain in a healing fashion using the energy cleaner. I use mine every night. I'm pretty active around the ranch here, up and down ladders, doing carpenter work, using the chainsaw, pushing boulders into the bucket of the Kubota tractor, down on my hands and knees doing concrete work. I go to bed with minor aches and pains. I wake up pain-free in the morning. You can also. Why not? Only $285 shipping included. Keep in mind I offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. That's from me to you personally. Check out the factory-made fitted mattress pads. We got our shipments squared away. I got pads being delivered this week. And, of course, I take PayPal, the most secure way to make any payment online. You can make your purchase of your energy cleaner and your mattress pad right there at my website at libertyman.com. Or you can send me a check. My address is right there at my website at thelibertyman.com. My toll-free R line, here it is, 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. Got open lines. We got a caller on hold. We got Glenn in Philadelphia. Good morning, Glenn.
Good morning, John. Hi. I wanted to continue the thought about the election with Roy Moore, and I'm disturbed by one thing I see in elections these days that hasn't been true most of my life. I just turned 57, but this has only been a phenomenon that we've seen in recent years, and I think it's a clear indicator that we're up against vote fraud in almost all elections. And here's why I say that, because the vote fraud can be used if a race is sufficiently close, but if the gap is too great, it becomes too apparent that something is amiss. Now, if you think back to your first experiences with elections in life, if you look back to, student body president elections in school or class president or class treasurer, typically you see several different people nominated or running for the position, but then usually in the course, the campaign, a clear favorite emerges, and it becomes clear that, while the other person may be a worthy opponent, one of them emerges, and with a clear victory, and with clear-cut percentages of gaining more votes. Now, or township supervisors, or even congressional elections. Typically, elections are not down to the wire, nose to nose, cutting it, by making it by just a few votes, or winning by just a hair. This is not how elections tend to actually work, when people are voting. And now, in whether it's congressional or gubernatorial elections, presidential elections, we're always supposed to believe that this is a neck and neck, down to the wire photo finish type race, and things can change in the last minutes and hours. And that's just not the way elections work. Pretty typically, people in groups make choices, and clear cut, and someone emerges in a more clear cut fashion as the more favored person. And this is why I say this era where every election we're supposed to believe that these are, nose to nose contests. It's just fallacious. And I think it means it's sort of, in the polling and everything. So, I think it indicates that there's fraud from the get-go. And then they get us into these final hours, neck and neck things. And that's when they throw the switches and throw away the boxes of ballots and, fraudulently, they falsify things.
Right. Well, there is a foundational thing that hasn't been discussed, and that's the United States Constitution, which called for the state legislatures to appoint the United States senator from the various states, so they would represent the interest of the state. Going to direct election of these senators was a massive mistake that never should have happened. That amendment to the U.S. Constitution needs to be done away with, and go back to what the founding fathers wanted, which was the state legislatures appointing or electing, your synonyms in this case, the U.S. senator from their own ranks, basically. And that was done, the goal of the people who put that amendment in there was to make us become a democracy. And the founding fathers did everything they could to help prevent us from becoming a democracy. And that was a critical part of it, was to have these U.S. senators appointed by the state legislators as part of the overall effort to stop the United States of America from becoming a democracy. And that needs to be done away with. Go ahead, Glenn.
I'm fond of saying that democracy is a degenerative state of affairs that immediately precedes chaos and then shortly thereafter tyranny. So if you look at democracies, always end up, with that principle that people figure out that they can vote themselves money from the public, funds, and then that's depleted, and then ensues chaos, and then ensues tyranny. So that's the way that works.
Yeah, and it always has. The founding fathers were educated men. The majority of them could translate English, Latin and Greek into English, because you couldn't get into Harvard University unless you could translate Greek and Latin into English. You couldn't even get in the door as an 18-year-old freshman. So, they knew history. They knew history. They knew that every democracy, without exception, had failed. And they wanted to prevent that from happening, so they did everything they could to stop it from becoming a democracy.
Right, exactly. But with this, with this caveat, again, even if you do have elections, when you have nominees or candidates that come up, in most cases, one person eventually emerges as a clear favorite with a comfortable percentage, being out, of votes that are out ahead of the other person. And, and all my life, I remember seeing presidential elections and that sort of thing. And very rarely do you ever see these nip and tuck elections, and What was the one presidential election where the paper printed up Dewey wins or something? And
that was when President Truman was elected, right?
Truman,
right.
Yeah, Harry Truman.
1940 was that 48? Was that 1948? I believe.
Sounds probably.
That sound right?
I don't know.
46
or 48.
But I mean,
so that's one case we saw, a miscarriage of expectation, and then we saw it with the Madam President issue of the magazine. I think it was Newsweek this time around. But I think many of the elections are rigged from the get-go in the sense that they create this pretense that this is a nose-to-nose race, and that's just not the way elections tend to work. So I think we're looking at systemic, ubiquitous fraud throughout here. Just by the fact that they give us this foolishness all the time. All right,
it was Chicago Tribune, November 1948. Okay, thanks for the call, Glenn. We appreciate it. Call number is 800-313-9443. It was the 17th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that called for the direct election of U.S. senators. Huge mistake, massive mistake. One that needs to be corrected. And we can do this, like the 18th Amendment, which prohibited the manufacturing of intoxicating liquor, was done away with. We can do away with these amendments, and that's one that needs to be done away with. As difficult as it would be, it really, really needs to happen. And I am dead set against, by the way, a constitutional convention. Any attempt to have a constitutional convention to rewrite the Constitution is extremely dangerous. It will finish our republic. We will be a democracy, and that will be the end of our republic if they ever have another constitutional convention. It will be the end of this country as we know it. U.S. Constitution is a fascinating document, and something people need to remember about the Constitution is it's not technology driven. It's not technology dependent. When they said freedom of the press, for example, they intentionally did not mention freedom print newspapers. It's a generic term. Press being all types of media. Another part of the Constitution which is extremely important and overlooked by most people on both sides, Republicans and Democrats, is Article 1, Section 8. That's the teeth. That's the teeth that gives force to the U.S. Constitution. Let's go here to Article 1, Section 8. They list 18 things that they can spend money on. The money spending authority of Congress. All money spending authority has to come from the House of Representatives, by the way. All the money spending authority of the U.S. Congress is in Article 1, Section 8. A former U.S. Senator who became my lifelong political enemy, Senator Jim Talent, he publicly stated, and he probably really believes this, unfortunately, that if the U.S. Constitution doesn't say we can't do it, then we can. Well, I can use a quick analogy here. If you hire a contractor to put a new concrete driveway on your premises from the street to your garage, and he also puts a swimming pool in the backyard, while you're gone on vacation, you come back, you find a new concrete driveway and a new swimming pool, and the contractor says, well, the contract didn't say I couldn't do it. That's a great analogy. Well, the U.S. Constitution enables the Congress, limits the Congress to doing what it says it can do, and the money spending authority in Article 1, Section 8, those 18 things, is what the Congress can spend money on. Now, James Madison wrote Article 1, Section 8. And about 1816, I guess it would have been, he was a member of Congress. And they were already, it was only been a few years, they were already using the introductory clause, it's not a clause, introductory beginning of Article 1, Section 8, as a clause. It says, here's the introductory sentence here. Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. They were using that term, general welfare, and provide for the common defense and general welfare as a clause. And the man who wrote this, James Madison, he basically chewed out his fellow members of Congress. And I can paraphrase what he said. Gentlemen, if I meant those two words, general welfare, to provide for the general welfare of the United States, if I meant that to be a clause to spend money on anything you want, why would I list those other 17 things? Why would I go to the trouble of listing these other things, giving specific, detailed instructions on what you may spend money on? Well, that's been going on ever since. And the majority of what U.S. Congress spends money on, more than half, is not listed in these 18 things. Here's what they are, beginning with number 2. To borrow money on the credit of the United States. They can spend money on that. They can spend money on number 3, regulating commerce with foreign nations. Number 5, I'm leaving out some of these for the sake of time here. Number 4, establish uniform rules of naturalization and uniform rules subject to bankruptcies. 5, to coin money, regulate the value thereof. 6, provide for punishment for counterfeiting. 7, to establish post offices and post roads. 8, to promote progress of science and useful arts. And this has to do with copyrights. 9, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court. That would be the federal court system. 10, to define and punish pericles and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the laws of nations. 11, to declare war, grant letters of marque, and reprisal. 12, to raise and support armies. 13, to provide and maintain a navy. 14, to make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces. 15, to provide calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the militia of the Union. And last, to provide for the arming and discipline of the militia. That's it. Of course, they provide for the 10 square miles for Washington, D.C. Here's our break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 13th of December. U.S. Constitution, not well understood by most Americans, certainly not followed by the majority of people we elect to U.S. Congress, both the House and the Senate. I recall that when Ron Paul was a U.S. congressman, he had a coalition of about 19 congressmen that actually would vote in compliance with the U.S. Constitution, particularly Article 1, Section 8, which meant they voted against almost everything. Because almost everything was in direct violation of the U.S. Constitution, particularly Article 1, Section 8. 19 men and women out of the whole U.S. Congress? What's wrong with this picture? Well, these men and women, they get elected by making promises to people that give them money. If you elect me, I will help you out in Congress, the people that give them money. And there's massive amounts of money changing hands. There's very few. And that coalition, I don't know if that coalition still exists now that Ron Paul's gone. Maybe there's something that's taken its place. Very few men and women in U.S. Congress, House or Senate, that actually vote the way the U.S. Constitution. They take an oath, by the way, to defend the Constitution when they take their oath of office. They take an oath to support the U.S. Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, I believe, if it's the same as these other oaths that are taken. And they don't care. Their goal is to get reelected. That's their goal. And they know they can't do that unless the money keeps flowing. And the money won't flow unless they violate their oath of office and vote against the U.S. Constitution that they swore an oath to. That's my reality. And I don't believe I'm going to find any contradiction to my reality. That is what happens every day of the week up there when they're taking these votes. It's a sad situation. The Founding Fathers did their best to prevent that from happening, but human greed took over. The Founding Fathers never intended for a senator or a representative to make a career. It was supposed to be a 2-year or 4 or 5 year or 6 year break from being a farmer or a businessman or whatever their career path might have been, a professor. Take a break from that. Go to U.S. Congress for 2 years or 4 years or 6, and then go back to your normal life. That's what they thought would happen. That's what they wanted to happen. But it's become a career path for many of these men and women up there, where they're just determined to stay there and milk it as long as they can. That's what they do, unfortunately. Will that change? Well, don't hold your breath on that. Pretty much out of time here this show. We'll have Tom Berryhill with us tomorrow, and we'll have a great day. In the meantime, medical supplies, energy, cleaner, essential oils now while you can, your firearms, ammunition. Never, ever give up your guns. Please do have a fun, safe, productive day, and God bless America.